Thank you, Michael. Okay, so the thing about my restaurant, I'm not going to talk about the Eve Men, so I did own my own restaurant, owned and operated my own restaurant for 5 years, and as I say now, that was my first experience in the nonprofit sector. Okay? It's been enough time now, it's not as painful anymore to say that. So the power of human connections. When I first heard about this, that's easy. The kitchen's all about connections, very, very human connections. And I thought about it, and I realized that we probably don't think about those enough. And so what I want to try to do is weave together some personal connections that I think inform certainly what I've done and what we try to do at DC Central Kitchen. So the first place that I landed was either my first or certainly my most formative childhood memory was the day after Bobby Kennedy was murdered. I remember my mother taking my little brother and me up to our room. We knelt down and prayed, and then we went to our toy chest, and we took out every toy gun we had and threw it in the trash. We never had a toy gun in our house again. I was 4 years old. I didn't know who Bobby Kennedy was. I didn't know what drove him. I didn't know what inspired him, what motivated him. I knew he was important to my parents, but this connection with someone that I never met, never will meet, certainly put me on a path to where I am now. And as I've read about Bobby, I've come to understand that what drove him was a very real connection he made down in the Mississippi Delta when he was a senator, experiencing third world abject poverty in the world's wealthiest country. And that drove him, much against his will, I believe, to run for president, and ultimately led to his death. And I think it's fair to say that process for me put me on a path to DC Central Kitchen. So it's 2007 now, and I'm at DC Central Kitchen. I've been there a few years, and we're doing all the meals that we do every day and the job training and a little bit of social enterprise business. And the District of Columbia, someone from the district comes to me and says, you know, Mike, we're feeding the city shelters, all the homeless shelters in town. At that time, probably about 2,000 meals a day. And they said, you know what, we want better food. We want more proteins. We want more fresh fruits and vegetables. We want more multi-component meals, more variety. And I said, that's great, so do we. But you know what, I don't work for you. You don't pay me. You know, we're doing this for free. We've been doing this for free for 16 years. And we'd be happy to do that. We do the best we can. But if you want to take some responsibility for this process and chip in half, just half of what it costs us just to feed the shelters, which is about half of all the work that we do in terms of meals, we'll make a commitment to do that. And so this started, I just lose, okay, there we go. So this started another series of, I guess, what you have to call human connections, with a number of different deputy mayors, folks in the District of Columbia government, went on for months. And finally, they said, sure, you're right. We're gonna make this investment. It's the right thing to do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this contract out to bid. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. We've been doing this for free for 16 years, and now they're gonna pay for it. Anyone can do it. But we went through the process, and we did get the contract. And they said, okay, we're gonna have this for you March 1st, March 15th, March 30th, April 15th. And then when it got to April 30th, we said, you know what? No. You're going to play games like this. We're going to do something that probably nonprofits don't usually do, either because they think they can't or they shouldn't. And we said we're going on strike. So we're not going to provide meals for the shelters until this contract is done. Now, the city had to scramble, but we also wanted to make sure no one went hungry, so we moved food around and everyone ate. But what Robert Egger, who founded the DC Central Kitchen, and I said at that same time was, out of respect for the men and women who are in those shelters, out of respect for the men and women who work in DC Central Kitchen, who lived in those shelters, we're not going to eat either. So that started what ultimately became an 8-day hunger strike. And that connection that created for me, for someone who'd been working in the hunger space for several years, for Robert, who'd been working in the anti-hunger space for 16 years, but was never hungry. Now, we could have quit, we could have stopped that and ate any time, so I don't pretend to really understand. But that connection that all of a sudden I had with the men and women we were serving, the families, the children, and the 50 million Americans today in our country that are hungry was a powerful, powerful thing. To feel that sense of loss or emptiness or lack of control was an amazing connection that propelled us in a new direction. So it worked. We got what we wanted. And all of a sudden, we had this revenue coming in to the kitchen that we'd never had before. So we were buying meat and vegetables, and it was great. And I was thinking all sorts of self-righteous, impure thoughts. You know, I'm thinking, well, there's Gandhi, and there's Chavez, and there's me. You know, like all these things that, you know, you're absolutely, we shouldn't be thinking, and certainly not doing what I'm doing, you shouldn't be thinking. And it was one of these self-righteous moments, very proud. I was looking at a flatbed stacked high with boxes of tomatoes, and look at what we've done. And something hit me. I said, I wonder where these tomatoes come from. And I did a little research, and I found out they actually came from Belgium. And they had been grown in a greenhouse and gassed in a jet coming across the ocean and traveled another couple thousand miles between warehouses and trucks to get to us. And we said, you know, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way to do this business that we're doing. So we embarked on another set of connections, reaching out to a couple folks I knew, and went down to the Shenandoah Valley to a group of Mennonite farmers that have a co-op down there in a produce auction. And I went down there and I talked to them about what I wanted to do. I said, we want to buy all the stuff that you can't sell because it's too big or too small or skinny, too funny looking, it doesn't fit in the right box. And we're going to buy thousands and thousands of pounds of product from you. And these folks down there, they couldn't have been nicer, but they looked at me like I had 8 heads. So this was not a great connection at the very beginning. But I went back 2 weeks later, and I met with the board of directors of this auction and talked about the plan. And again, they were interested, but wildly, wildly skeptical. The auction started about 3 weeks after that, and we went down, and we bought, and we paid our bills, and we went down the next week and bought some more, and the week after that, and the week after that, and quickly became the largest purchaser of produce from that auction. And at the end of the season, about 24 of these folks, those that could either drive or ride in cars, came up and volunteered with us. And I went to Dennis Showalter, one of the guys, sort of the leader of the group, and I said, Dennis, I can't thank you enough for believing in this and partnering with us and doing business with us. And he said, Mike, you know, you have no idea. Thank you, DC Central Kitchen. This has literally changed our community. So this crazy, odd connection from the city down to the Shenandoah Valley had changed this group of folks. But it also had a profound impact on all the connections that we make throughout the city at the kitchen. It allowed us to do better food, healthier food, fresher food, and really pushed us into this realm of social enterprise, doing locally sourced, scratch-cooked meals in schools, which allowed us to hire about 80 new people, most of whom are graduates from our training program, felons, recovering addicts, homeless, chronically unemployed men and women in our city, and added millions of dollars to our budget to support all of our other programs. But the connection that's really important, and the piece that we try so hard to do, to put people in a place to break this incredibly destructive and generational cycle of incarceration, addiction, homelessness, hunger, and poverty, comes together in the folks that graduate from our program. And one of these folks, Dwayne Arrington, and this is a very, very typical story of men and women in our program, grew up in Southeast DC, just a couple miles from here as the crow flies. And he told me when he was a student that when he was 10 years old, he thought to himself, if he said. I'm alive when I'm 21. And that was a huge if. If I'm alive when I'm 21, I'm probably going to be in prison. His father was a dealer. He was in prison. His mother was an addict. She would leave him and his brothers for weeks at a time in apartments with no water, heat, electricity. And when Dwayne was 11, he was arrested for the first time stealing food to feed him and his brothers. And this started a very predictable cycle of violence and gangs and incarceration. And he spent pretty much the next 23 years of his life in prison. Maybe 4 months out here, 6 months here, maybe 8 months there, but 23 years. And when he got out, even though he did all the things in prison that we tell you to do when you go to prison, get a GED, learn a trade, get a certificate, couldn't find a job. Came to the kitchen, tough case at first, but he connected with the other men and women that were there that had been through incarceration and had faced these kind of obstacles and fit in and did amazingly well. And we hired him right after he graduated. He's been with us now for 6 years. He's a supervisor. He's got health insurance, a retirement plan, but most importantly, he has a family. He has a 2-year-old daughter. And his daughter, when she is 10, and don't think that just because this is a girl we're talking about, it's any different. We have many, many women who come to us out of prison. But when she's 10, she is not going to say, if I'm alive when I'm 21, I'll be in prison. So these connections from someone I've never met to the folks in the District of Columbia, the farmers in the Shenandoah Valley, bringing them back to DC Central Kitchen and the men and women in our community that you've heard people talk about already, we'll talk more this afternoon, to make those connections in a thoughtful way are going to change the way that we think about everything that we do and certainly change the face of our community. So I wanted to end sort of where I began, and I'm going to read this because I never want to get these words wrong. The words of Bobby Kennedy in a speech he gave in South Africa in 1966. He said, it is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time someone stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So those ripples, those connections have and are, and if we are purposeful, meaningful, and thoughtful about them, will continue to strike down those walls of oppression and make our shared community a better place. Thank you very much.